We continue now at the top of Daf Yomi in Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 90b. On the previous Amud, the Gemara said that any time a chatos and an ola are brought together as karbonos, the chatos always comes first, and the Gemara is in the middle of bringing a brisa which lists various kinds of animals, which ones come first in terms of karbonos. And the Gemara now continues and says, "My lav, is it not the chag?" We're talking here about sukkos, and Rashi explains the question. "My lav, is it not the musfei hachag?" We're talking about the musaf that is brought on sukkos, the seirim have a chatos. The goats there are the carbon chatos. Uchavasim ola, the sheep are the ola. V'katani kavasim kodman, and it said in the brisa on the previous summon that the sheep, they come first, and so therefore it seems the ola comes before the chatos. And the Gemara says, "Lo, no, linedava." We're talking here about just karbonos that are donations. The brisa is not talking about sukkos at all, and therefore it is not a question. Rashi says, "Lo, no, nedava ushneim ola." We're talking where they're both ola, and so therefore it has nothing to do with chatas and ola. It's just saying which animals come first. If you have multiple nedavas of olas, as the Gemara now continues and explains the brisa, parim kodmin la'elim, bulls come before rams. Shekein nisrabu ben asachim, because the libations are more by bulls than rams. V'chein elim l'kvasim, and rams come before sheep. And kvasim l'seirim, and that's for the same reason, because again the libations. And kvasim l'seirim, the sheep come before goats. Shekein nisrabu ba'alya, because there's an increase, so to speak, by the sheep in terms of the tail. It means to say that the tail is burned on the mizbeach by the sheep, and that is not true by the goats. And Rashi explains, "V'tayim amai kadmu parim la'elim shekein nisrabu ben chasim," and that's like the psukim always say, "Par shlosha esronim, v'ayil shnei esronim, v'cheves isaron." A bull is 3 esronim, and ayil is 2 esronim. A cheves is 1 isaron, so that's why it goes in that order. And then kvasim come before the seirim, shekein nisrabu ba'alya, because when it comes to the kvasim, the tail is offered on the mizbeach le'inyanei murav. That's in terms of the sacrificial portions. There is more that is burned on the mizbeach. Now Rashi notes, "V'yavagav dehashta ba'ola kaimina." Now, even though here we're not talking about karbonos where there are only sacrificial portions, we're talking about an ola where the whole thing is burned on the mizbeach. Shekula kolel, it's all burned, and so therefore it really is not, in terms of ola, there's nothing more that's burned by kvasim than seirim. But Rashi says, "Miu, nevertheless, tzad riboy lemizbeach eshkechon be gabe shlamim v'chatas." We find by shlamim and chatas, at least by those, the kavasim, again, there is more that is burned on the mizbeach, and so therefore kavasim come before seirim. And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here, the following proof. The Brisa says, Par Kohen Mashiach, the power that is brought by the Kohen Gadol when he sins, Kodem Lepar Helam Davar Shel Tzibor, that precedes the bull that is brought when the community sins, and Par Helam Davar Shel Tzibor, Kodem Lepar Avodas Kochavim, the power of the communal sin, that comes before the power of Avodah Zarah, when the community does Avodah Zarah, and Par Avodas Kochavim, the bull that's brought for that Avodah Zarah, Kodem L'Seirei Avodas Kochavim, that comes before the goats for Avodah Zarah, the Afagav the par avodas kochavim ola, even though the bull of the avodah zarah that's brought, that's an ola. Useirei avodas kochavim chatos, and the goats that are brought for avodah zarah, that's a chatos. Still, we're seeing that the par comes first. And again, we see that when the par and the sar are brought together, normally we said above that the chatos is supposed to go first, but here it seems that the par goes first. Rashi explains, Par Kohen Mashiach Kodem Lepar Helam Davar Mefurish Tam Bahorios Perak Beis, in terms of the par of the Kohen Gadol preceding the par of the community, that's explained in Horios, Kasher Sarav Par HaRishon, Rishon Yehela Par HaEdel L'chol Masav, it says in the Pasuk it should be first. Par Helam Davar Kodem Lepar Avodas Kochavim, the Par Helam Davar is before the par of Avodah Zarah, and that's because Shezeh Chatos V'zeh Ola. That's because the Par Helam Davar is a Chatos, and the par of Avodah Zarah, as we're about to say, is an Ola, so the Chatos comes first. V'yamr Chatos kodemis, we said before that the chatos comes first. But par avodas kochavim kodem l'sir avodas kochavim, the par of avodah zara, that comes before the sir of avodah zara. Alma, we see yesh ola kodemis l'chatos. Here we have an example where the ola is coming before the chatos. And the Gemara continues and says, "Ve'ema me'resha," but you're bringing a question from, again, the end of this brisa, that it says that the power of the avodah zarah comes before the soyer, the ola coming before the chatos. But look at the beginning of the brisa, "Par helam davar shel tzibor, kodem lepar avodas kochavim." It said that the par helam davar shel tzibor, that comes before the power of avodah zarah. And so there you see like what we said earlier, you see that the chatos is coming before the ola. The par helam davar shel tzibor is a chatos, and the power of avodah zarah, as we said, that is an ola, and so you see the chatas is coming before the ola. And the Gemara says, "Bechad mina mihalo kamrinan dechatas kidma." When you're talking about of the same type, so there we understand that the chatas comes first. In other words, when you have the par helam davar shel tzibur and you have the par avodah zara, we understand that the par helam davar shel tzibur is going to come first because they're both a par, and the par helam davar shel tzibur is the chatas. But ki kamrinan betrei mine. But we're talking here where you have two different kinds of animals. You have the par avodah zara, which is an ola. You have the sira avodah zara, which is a chatas, and you see that the ola is coming first. And the Gemara continues and states the question: Eshkechon ola dekidma lachatas. Here, by two different kinds of animals, we find the ola coming before the chatas, and again that goes against what we said earlier on the previous Amud. And the Gemara continues and answers: Amri b'marava mishmei de Rabba bar Mori. They said in the West in the name of Rabba bar Mori, chatas avodas kochav. And when it comes to the chatas of avodah zara, chaser aleph. It's missing the letter aleph. Lechatos ksiv. It's written lechatos without an aleph, and that tells us that this particular chatos, it is secondary. The par comes first. Ravina says kemishpat ksiv b'hu. It says the word kemishpat, and what that means is the way it's written in the pasuk. That is the order which it should be offered. And the Gemara says hashta da'asas lahachi. Once you give that answer, if you're going to learn from kemishpat, it has to be in that particular order. So then afilu tema parim dechag, all the way back at the question we had at the top of the Amud when the Gemara said my lav dechag, when the Brisa brought the precedence of various kinds of animals, we can even say we are talking about the parim dechag, afilu tema parim dechag nami. We can even say that Brisa is talking about the bulls of Sukkos, and so therefore again the question was, why does it seem that the chatas is coming last? Shouldn't the chatas go first? But kimishpatam ksibahu, it says kimishpatam over there as well, and therefore they should be offered in the order that they are found in the pasuk. And Rashi explains, ve'ema me'reisha, why not bring from the beginning of the Brisa? Kilomar ademosavt misef, instead of asking a question from the end of the Brisa, sayon me'reisha, you can bring support from the beginning of the Brisa. The katani par helam davar kodem lepar avodas kochavim, it says the par helam davar, which is a chatas, that goes before the par of avodas zara, which is an ola. Umeshani la bechad mina lo koamrinan, and the answer the Gemara gave to that is, if it's all the same kind of animal, that's no issue. The havadai nicholi de bechad mina chatas kidma, we understand that by the same kind of animal, the chatas is going to come first. Ki amrinan betrei mine, we're talking about two animals, kashal, and that's where we have a difficulty. The koamrit min katan shal chatas kodem lemin gadol shalola, because we said earlier on the previous Amud, even if it is a species of lesser holiness, so to speak, of chatas, that comes before something greater of a carbanola. Like we said on the previous Amud, even a chatas ha'of comes before the olas behema that it accompanies. But over here, the par ola kodem l'seir chatas. Here you have two different kinds of animals, and the par of the ola is coming before the seir of the chatas. And the Gemara answered lechatas ksiv. It says lechatas without an aleph. Beparsha shlach lecha v'hayim me'enei ha'edo nesa b'shkago ksiv hasam usir echad lechatas chaser aleph. It says lechatas, it's missing an aleph. Lomar, and that is to say, she'eno keshar chatos. It's not like other chatos. Shekol chatos shebetorah haboy ma'ola chatos kodemes. In general, when a chatos comes together with an ola, the chatos comes first. The vizu, but over here, in this case, ola kodemes, the ola comes first again because it's missing an aleph. And then the Gemara gave another answer. Kamishpat ksiv. It says the word kamishpat bahukra uminchaso v'nisko kamishpat. In that pasuk it says uminchaso v'nisko kamishpat mashma kamishpat seder mikro. Just like it is in the order in the psukim. Kach seder avodah, so that's the way the avodah should be done. Upar b'reisha ksiv, and par is written first in the pasuk. And afilu tema par muchvasim the musaf chag. You could say the brisa earlier when it's talking about the bulls and the sheep, it's talking about the musaf of Sukkos. Hach masnisa detanya le'el kavasim kodmin l'seirim. The brisa which said the sheep come before the goats. Lo tiksh, it's not a difficulty. The chamishpat ksiv b'hu, it says the word kamishpat over there. Umashma keseder ha'amur b'inyan useirim ksuvim achronim, and you have to do it in the order that it's written. And goats are written last. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. They had the following question: Chatas ha'of, violas behema umaister. Let's say there are three karbonos that need to be brought: Chatas ha'of, olas behema, and meister behema. And the Gemara here assumes the Chatas ha'of takes precedence to olas behema, as we said earlier. We also assume that olas behema takes precedence to meister behema because ola is greater. And also the Gemara is assuming that meister behema should take precedence to Chatas ha'of because we said in the Mishnah that animal karbonos take precedence to bird karbonos. karbanos, and so therefore over here you have essentially a circle of precedence. We don't know which one should take precedence. And so the Gemara says, Eizu mehen kodem, which comes first? Tikdom chatas of, one will say chatas of should come first. Ikom meiser dekadem la, meiser behema should go before that. Likdim meiser, you say meiser behema should come first. Ika olas behema dekadem le, olas behema should precede that. Tikdom olas behema, you'll say olas behema should come first. Ika chatas of dekidmo la, so you have chatas of that should precede that. And so what do you do in this situation? And the Gemara continues and answers, Hacha targimo, here they answered, min zevach adif, the one that's a zevach, which means the one that is slaughtered, the one that is an animal should come first. We'll see Rashi in a moment. And b'ma'arova amri, in the west they say, ayla ba olas behema b'chatas ha'of, the olas behema is within, so to speak, the chatas ha'of, v'yagbasa mimaiser, and therefore it is lifted up over the meiser behema. And Rashi explains, chatas ha'of v'olas behema meiser behema shloshtan omden, you have three of these karbonos, they're all standing in front of us. And Rashi continues, Hacha targimu, here they say, meaning bebavel, in Bavel they say, that min zevach adif, the animal that's being slaughtered comes first, which means, v'yachtim meiser, according to this answer, the meiser behema should be first, v'yachar kach chatas v'yola, and then should come the chatas ha'of, and then the olas behema. De'ilu olas behema lo motzi kidma l'chatas ha'of, the olas behema cannot come before the chatas ha'of, migzeres ha'kosav, that's a gzeres ha'kosav, that the chatas ha'of comes first, but the meiser behema, since it is a min zevach, it comes before all of them. And Rashi continues, the Gemara then brought the answer of Eretz Yisrael of Ayla Ba, the language of the Gemara was Ayla Ba Olas Behema B'chatas Ha'of V'yagbasa Mimaiser. The Olas Behema is within, so to speak, Chatas Ha'of, and it is greater than Meiser, which Rashi explains, Ayla Ba Chashivus the Olas Behema, the importance of the Olas Behema, Sheba Ima, which comes together with it, V'hi Chashuva Mimaiser, and that is more important than Meiser Behema, meaning you have an Olas Behema and a Chatas Ha'of that are coming together, but the Olas Behema is more important than Meiser Behema. She Kodesh Kodashim V'chalal, because the Olas Behema is Kodesh Kodashim and it's totally burned on the Mizbeach. Umigzeres HaKosav, now we know there's a Gzeres HaKosav that HaChatas Kodemis, that the Chatas comes first. V'yava Pisha Zum Min Zevach, even though this is an animal, that we know, but V'yagbasam Mi Meiser, but it's lifted over Meiser, meaning Levat El Chashivas Shem Min Zevach Shabo, the fact that Meiser Behema is a Zevach, is a slaughtered animal, that Chashivas is nullified. Ba'ola Nami Isel Osa Chashivas, because Ola has that same Chashivas. Uvatolei Migzeres HaKosav, and that Chashivas is nullified to the Chatas Ha'of. And Hilkach, therefore, according to the answer in Eretz Yisrael, Yaktim Chatas Ha'of Li'ola, the Chatas Ha'of comes before the Ola, V'ola L'Meiser, and the Ola comes before Meiser Behema, and Meiser Behema comes last, and so therefore, essentially, the difference between the approach in Bavel and the approach in Eretz Yisrael is that in Bavel, Meiser Behema comes first, and then the Chatas, then the Ola, whereas in Eretz Yisrael, the Chatas comes first, and then the Ola, and then comes the Meiser Behema. And we will take a look at Tosfos, Tikdom Chatas Ha'of. If you say that Chatas Ha'of should come first, Ika Meiser Dekadim Le, but Meiser Behema takes precedence over Chatas Ha'of. That was an assumption throughout the Gemara that if it was just Chatas Ha'of versus Meiser Behema takes precedence because it's an animal. And Tosfos asks, Tema, it's a wonder. Tikdom Chatas Ha'of Mikal V'chomer. Chatas Ha'of versus Meiser Behema. Chatas Ha'of actually should take precedence. The Mishnah only said that animal karbanos take precedence over bird karbanos, but that was not necessarily referring to every kind of bird carbon. Chatas Ha'of should take precedence to Meiser Behema from the following Kal V'chomer. Uma Olas Behema Shichamur, if Olas Behema, which is strict, V'chula Kalil, it's totally burned on the Mizbeach, Umin Zevach, it's a type of slaughtered animal, Kodemes LeMeiser, but that comes before Meiser Behema, and Chatas Ha'of Kodem La, and yet the Chatas Ha'of comes before the Olas Behema. So Meiser, when it comes to Meiser Behema, She'eno Kalil, it's not totally burned on the Mizbeach. The Olas Behema Kodemes Lo, and the Olas Behema takes precedence. Eino din shchit the Chatas Ha'of Kodem La, shouldn't it be logical the Chatas Ha'of should precede it? And Tosfos continue and answer v'yesh lomer. We can answer the chidushu that the whole idea is a chidush. Had the chatas ha'of kodem liola. The fact the chatas ha'of precedes ola is a chidush. V'lo gamrinan minei. We can't learn anything from there. Just because chatas ha'of goes before the accompanying ola, it doesn't mean that it goes before meiser behema. And that's why the assumption of our Gemara is that meiser behema takes precedence. And the Gemara continues with the Mishnah, Kol ha-chatos shebetorah, all carbon chatos in the Torah, kodmos la-ashamos, they take precedence to carbon asham. Chutz me asham mitzorah, with the exception of the asham of the mitzorah, of the leper, mivnei shehu ba'al hechsher, because that comes to render him fit. That's part of the purification process. And the Mishnah continues, Kol ha'ashamos shevatorah, all hashamos in the Torah, boin b'nei shtayim uvoin b'kesef shkolim. They come 2 years old. That's a ram that's 2 years old, and they are worth a minimum of 2 silver shekel. Chutz me asham nazir v'yasham mitzorah, with the exception of the asham brought by the nazir and the asham brought by the mitzorah. Shehein boin b'nei shnasan, that they come a year old, sheep that are a year old. Ve'ein boin b'kesef shkolim, and they do not come with that minimum value of 2 silver shekel. And the Mishnah continues, Kashem shekodmin b'hakravasan, just like they have precedence in terms of when they are offered, kodmin b'achilasan, the same rules apply in terms of precedence of when they are eaten. And the Mishnah continues, Shlamim shel emesh u shlamim shel yom. Let's say you have shlamim from yesterday and shlamim from today. Shel emesh kodmin, the shlamim of yesterday come first. L'shel yom, they come before the shlamim of today. And shlamim shel emesh, let's say you have shlamim from yesterday and chatos v'yasham shel hayom, chatos and asham today. Shlamim shel emesh kodmin divrei Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir say that the yesterday shlamim come before the chatos and the asham today. The chachamim omer, but the chachamim say chatos kodemis, the chatos comes first, the asham as well, mivnei shei kodshei kodshim, because it is kodshei kodshim, it is the holier kind of carbon, and therefore it comes first. And the Mishnah continues, V'chulan hakohanim rashayin lishnos ba'achilosan la'achlan sluyin ushlukin umuvusholin. All of these that the kohanim are eaten, they can eat in various ways. They can eat it roasted or boiled or cooked. And loses l'socho tavle chulin v'tavle truma. They can put in spices that are chulin and spices that are truma, because kohanim can eat truma. Divrei Rabbi Shimon, these are the words of Rabbi Shimon. Rabbi Meir Omer, Rabbi Meir says, Lo yitein l'socho tavle truma. He should not put into it spices of truma. Shelo yavi ha-truma lidei, because it shouldn't bring the truma to disqualification, because by karbonos there's a certain time limits, etc., in terms of eating the karbonos, which don't apply to truma. So if you're going to put the truma with the carbon, it's possible that you're going to bring that truma to disqualification. And Rashi explains, Kodmos la'ashamos chatos come before ashamos, im haya makriv chatos v'yasham. Let's say he's bringing a chatos and asham, ve'evion, and he brings them chatos kodemis, the chatos comes first. Kedetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah earlier, shedam anitan al daled karnos v'ala yisod, chatos comes first, because its blood is applied to the 4 corners of the mizbeach, and the remainder of the blood is poured to the base of the mizbeach. But the asham mitzorah mivnei shuba lahachshir, that already comes first, because it is to render es ha-mitzorah, to render the mitzorah fit lekachim, that now he's able to have kachim, ulabias mikdash, and now he's able to enter the mikdash. Hilka chashivas ulagabe shatahara tuluya bo, therefore it's considered important, because purification is dependent upon it. Uvain bekesef shkolim, asham in general, they come for 2 silver shekel. Tichsiv, as it's written, be'erkacha kesef shkolim bo'asham mi'ilos. By asham mi'ilos it says 2 shkolim. V'yasi asham taloi, v'asham begezelos begzereshava, be'erkacha be'erkacha. Asham taloi and asham gezelos are learned from there through gezereshava of be'erkacha be'erkacha. V'asham shivcha charufa gamar ba'ayel and be'el be'el, and asham shivcha charufa also learned through gezereshava kedamar be'ezel mekoman, like we say in ezel mekoman. So they're all again 2 silver shekel. Chutz me asham nazir, with the exception of asham nazir. Techsiv keves ben shenaso, it says 1-year-old sheep. Umidayel ben beis shanim b'shtei slaim. Now, from the fact that the ram is 2 years old and 2 silver shekel, keves ben shana, if it's a sheep that's a year old, lav b'shtei slaim, who you see that that's not going to be 2 silver shekel. And then the Mishnah said, kach kodman b'achilosan, just like there's precedence in offering, so too in eating them. Akulu b'nei achila, we're going on all karbonos that are eaten. Kagon chatos liyasham, for example, chatos takes precedence to the asham. Asham l'toda, asham before toda, v'toda l'shlamim, toda before shlamim, u'shlamim l'bechor, and shlamim before bechor. Shlamim shebo emesh. Now this is a girsa that Rashi has. Some say that this Rashi is an earlier version of Rashi, which Rashi may have retracted, but Rashi has a girsa of shlamim that came yesterday, la'azara. The shlamim came yesterday to the azara, v'sho ad hayom v'shachtan, and he delayed a day, he delayed until today in order to slaughter them. So in other words, we're not talking about the already slaughtered shlamim that now was from yesterday, but we're talking about an animal that came to the azara, and the slaughtering was delayed, according to this version of Rashi. The chatos v'yasham shel yom, and the chatos and the yasham are today, omdin lahakriv, they're standing ready ready to be offered. So Shlomim shall emesh kodmin. So the Shlomim from yesterday come first. The zilzol lahashosan kol kach, because it's a disgrace to delay it so long. V'hoelu bo rishon yikravu rishon. Since they came first, they should be offered first. V'chein mefarish b'tosefta Zevachim. This is explained in the Tosefta of Zevachim. Uvechulan b'cholan echolin, and all of the karbonos that are eaten rashayin hakohanim l'shanos b'achilosan. The kohanim can deviate in terms of how they want to eat them, meaning to say they can eat them in various fashions. Kagon lo'ochlan sluyin shlukin amuvasholin. They can eat them roasted or boiled or cooked. Lidei psul. But then the question about truma. Some say you shouldn't bring the truma lidei psul. That's Rabbi Meir's opinion. You shouldn't put in tavlei truma. You shouldn't bring the truma to disqualification. Shetam kodshim hanasa noser osur. Let's say the kodshim is going to become noser. It's going to be leftovers. That taste is going to forbid the tavlei truma as well. And we will take a look at Tosfos. Tosfos have a slightly different girsa in Rashi. Shlamim shel emesh v'chatos v'yasham shel yom. Shlamim shel emesh kodmin. Again, the yesterday shlamim and the chatos and the yasham today. The shlamim, they come first. That was according to Rabbi Meir. The chachamim say the chatos comes first because it's kodshei kodshim. And Tosfos say perish b'kuntras. Rashi explains the zilzul hu lahashosam kol kach. You shouldn't delay it so much. Shetzuras habasar miskalkelas, because the meat is going to be ruined if it's left. And according to that, we're talking about an animal that was already slaughtered, and the meat is what's coming from yesterday. But Tosfos say v'alchinam dochak. Tosfos say in terms of Rashi that Rashi is forcing himself for no reason in this explanation. Elahainu taima d'shlamim shel emesh ein lahem heter ela ad halayla. The real reason is because yesterday's shlamim, we only have now the amount of time left is just until tonight, because it's 2 days and a night. So 1 day's already gone, 1 night's already gone. You just have until the night. The chatos v'yasham shel yom, and if it's a chatos and asham of today, ad haboker, so you still have until the next morning. The nechalin liyom v'layla, because that's eaten for a day and a night. And the Gemara says, they had the following question, Tadiru Makudish, let's say you have something that's more frequent, but you also have something that's more holy. Eza Mehem Kodem, what comes first? Tadir Kodem Mishum de Tadir. Does the frequent item come first because it's frequent? O Dilma Makudish Kodem, the Kaddish, or maybe the holy item comes first because it is holy. Rashi explains, Tadiru Makudish Kagon, Dam Olas Tamid, Vidam Chatas. Let's say, for example, you have the blood of an Olas Tamid and the blood of a Chatas, then they're standing there. Zed Tadir, Vizem Makudish, so the Olas Tamid is tadir, it's frequent, but the other one is holier. V'zem kodesh mimenu. This one's holier. The dam chatos is holier. Kedamran dam chatos kodem ladam ola. Like we say, the dam chatos comes before dam ola. Mimnei shumaratza, because it affects appeasement in terms of kapara. Inami, or another example, olas musfe rosh chodesh. Let's say you have the musaf of rosh chodesh, that's an ola. Uparo eid, and then you have the communal bull omdim. So they're standing before us. Zed tadir. This one's more frequent. V'zem kodesh, and this one is holier. So which one takes precedence? And the Gemara continues, Tashma, coming here a proof from the Mishnah earlier, Tamidin Kodmin Lemusafin, Carbon Tamid comes before Carbon Musaf, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tzadi Aleph Amud Aleph.